So now we have a fireside chat. We're going to have Aidan Gomez, who's the co-founder and CEO of Cohere, and Jordan Jacobs, who's the co-founder and managing partner of Radical Ventures. And they're going to share their thoughts on envisaging the intelligent enterprise, exploring the future of language AI. Please welcome Aidan and Jordan to the stage.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us and sticking around. It's very nice to be here in Montreal. Aidan, so we got to know each other about 4 years ago, but going back just a little bit further, you're one of the co-authors of the Transformer paper, Attention is All You Need, and then a founder of Cohere. So that was 2017, the paper.
Yeah,
Cohere, you launched in 2019 to build large language models of the type that we were seeing just in a few places now. And then fast forward, and almost exactly 5 years after you guys released the paper, ChatGPT comes out. So just take us through the last 4 or 5 months and where we are now compared to where we were back when you wrote it.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of living in the aftermath of a huge moment for humanity, right? Like, I think ChatGPT was the first time that the average person interacted and held a conversation with something that wasn't a human. But like the first time we've had conversations with, silicon and some chips. That's a huge moment, and it really inspired people. I think that the interface of language, it's like the intellectual modality. It's the default that we go to interacting with each other. And so, as a product experience, ChatGPT feels magical. Like it's exactly the way that you want to interact with something that's intelligent, and exactly the way that you want to interact with something that has the potential to understand you. And so that's kind of ignited this realization in the world. And so a light bulb flipped on, and if you and I were having this conversation maybe 6 months ago, we would first start off, hey, here's what a large language model is, here's why you should care about it, here's why it's important. Now everyone has first-party experience interacting with the technology. And so we've moved into this like post-awareness, pre-deployment moment. And I think this is like an extraordinarily exciting time because there's so much opportunity, and we're going to start to see these first killer applications start to emerge.
So take us through what you think some of those are.
Yeah, I think every single industry is going to be impacted. The most obvious one is maybe customer support. So I see kind of two halves to the revolution of language models. The first half is on the product front. So when I was graduating high school, I actually chose my bank. I chose CIBC because CIBC was one of the first ones to get a mobile app. And I wanted to interact with my bank through a mobile app, not through my computer or calling in or going into the store. And so I made a purchasing decision as a consumer based on the interface I had onto that product and set of services. I think the folks who are, like the kids who are graduating high school today, they're going to make their buying decisions on a whole swath of products on the basis of which one has the most intelligent agent that I don't need to go through 10 layers of GUI to find how to initiate a transfer or sit on the phone for an hour. So one half of this transformation is going to come in the form of every single product needs to be transformed by this technology. The other side is we're starting to see evidence of the efficiency increase to workers when they're augmented or when you sit a worker next to one of these agents. So there was a paper from MIT, which came out, I believe, a month ago, and there was a randomized control trial, about 400 white-collar workers, industry agnostic, so all over the place. The treatment group got access to ChatGPT. The control group, of course, didn't. And on average, across these workers, across industries, the efficiency increase was like, I believe, 35 or 37%, which is like industrial revolution, large efficiency increase. And so there's that's the other side of this coin. So on one side, we need to reinvent all of our products in light of this new technology. On the other side, we're going to be augmenting our workforce, ourselves, with something that makes us massively more productive. So Cohere, we're super excited about helping with both of those and being like the enterprise's partner to both of those major projects that we're embarking on.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and maybe you can explain to people, you are the primary competitor to OpenAI. The technology that you invented is the underpinning for ChatGPT, the technology that you invented when you were at Google Brain as a kid. Please just kind of walk us through what are the differences between what you're doing, what they're doing, and then it would be really interesting to hear how much this has accelerated, like the demand has accelerated since ChatGPT for your products and what you're seeing out there in the market overall.
Yeah, so OpenAI is a fantastic team. I really appreciate the innovation they've done, and I think the more players we have in this space, the better. It's better for the market. Their orientation, they're a research lab and largely partnered with Microsoft, which owns 49%. And so their orientation has really shifted towards ChatGPT, which is a consumer product, and then serving Microsoft's first-party products like Bing, like GitHub, Office 365, et cetera. So for us at Cohere, our concern is much more on enterprise and supporting developers within enterprise in adopting this and integrating it into products. So that means solving things like data privacy. OpenAI is, of course, deeply partnered with Microsoft, and so they're exclusively on Azure. For Cohere, we're available on every single cloud provider, whether it's AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle. And so we can deploy anywhere in a completely data private way, so within a company's VPC, in a way that Cohere can't see your data, and so you can start to put these models into mission-critical systems, ones where you just can't have data leakage or it leaving your own secure environment.
And so part of our thesis, Radical is a Toronto-based fund, but has offices in Palo Alto and London. I think we're now the largest AI-focused venture capital fund in the world. Our thesis is that all the software on Earth gets replaced by AI software over the next decade. So if you think about software, it's coded, it's hard-coded, it's shipped. It doesn't improve once it ships until you ship the next version, whereas AI is learning software that is improving in real time or near real time. It's very clear that a huge portion of that shift is going to move towards language models at a foundational layer and then kind of permeating up through the products. Talk to us a little bit about what the demand that you're seeing and how the curve is accelerated. I mean, just to put in context of numbers, before ChatGPT came out, McKinsey, PwC, Bank of America had said that AI will add 15 trillion net new to the global economy by the end of the decade. Since ChatGPT has come out, the estimation from Goldman Sachs is that 1.5% of annual GDP in the US will be spent on AI, and in particular on transformer-based AI and a lot of it on language models. So we're talking about trillions of dollars of spend a year, basically upgrading the software cycle, expediting the software cycle and upgrading the software in a very short period of time. What kind of demand have you seen from industry? How significant is it? Is it at the CTO level or the C-suite level? I mean, I know the answers to these questions sitting on your board, but please, walk me through what you're seeing.
Yeah, like I was saying before, I think a light bulb has just flipped on, and it's all the way up in the board and C-suite, and it's becoming a strategic concern. Like I was mentioning earlier, consumers are going to make buying decisions based on products' adoption of this technology, and so it's extremely, extremely urgent to be the first one to offer that functionality, offer that feature. Since ChatGPT, since that awareness, since these executives and their children and their moms have all interacted with this in a concrete way, I think that the demand has exploded, and understandably, because the technology is starting to get ready for prime time. The remaining barriers, like the things that are stopping us from seeing this popping up everywhere, it really is about integration. And so the ability to deploy these in a safe environment in a way that doesn't compromise your user data, that doesn't get fed into your competitor's training job. And so that's really what we're working on, is trying to solve that, lower those barriers, and be the partner to all of these companies that they need to transform their technology, but there's just a access barrier because of those constraints.
And how do you, dealing with the demand, I mean, you are a startup that, you existed for about 3 years and change, really started to commercialize only in the last, within the last year, or even less than that. The team has scaled really quickly. How do you manage the demand? Are you able to manage the demand? Is anyone going to be able to manage the demand? Because there's really very few companies that can do this for lots of reasons. There's a lack of talent around that can build this stuff. It takes time to build it. You need massive compute. There's a huge constraint there. So you guys have dedicated access to massive compute that is very hard for others to get. There's cache moats. There's all kinds of barriers to entry here. So very few companies that are able to do this. Given the demand that is put on a startup, how do you manage that? How do you grow into it?
It's difficult. I would say that Cohere is about 200 people, and so we can't do it all ourselves. We do need to partner with other organizations. The fantastic thing is that at the infrastructure level, at the product level, it's completely scalable. And so we're serving many, many thousands of users. So when we actually go to market and we need to help these organizations think through that integration problem and think through adoption, what we do is we partner with large solutions integrators or large consultancies that can bring in teams to actually help them do the work. And so we're augmenting ourselves with partners who assist with that go-to-market motion, who help with the actual integration step.
Got it. Okay, so let's step back from what you're doing and think about the space overall. There's a lot of existential angst lately about how fast this area is advancing. I mean, the general performance accuracy measurement out there is run by Stanford. You guys recently topped OpenAI and others in the field. You were at the top of the field in their most recent results at Helm and Stanford. So things are advancing very, very, very fast. Do you believe that we're on a path toward an existential threat from superintelligence?
I personally see a lot more opportunity for benefit than for existential risk. I'm a bit disappointed in how the public narrative has shifted. I think that there was a letter recently that was signed by a bunch of scientists calling for a 6-month pause in AI development. I think that's super counterproductive. For one, if you pause, no one else is pausing, and so you're just seeding a competitive mode, and that's bad geopolitically. It's bad for any company that participates in the pause. The second thing is that the opportunity for good with these models, with advanced AI, is so significant that a 6-month pause is really like a quite harmful thing to implement, in the sense that this is the most promising technology to deliver us stuff like industrial revolution level efficiency gains or a generalized cure to all cancers. And so 6 months delay of the advent of that sort of technology, I think it's, I have a strong moral issue with advocating for that. The fears, though, fears about powerful, general tools, that's reasonable. There are risks with the technology. It's generally capable, and it can do a lot of harm as well as immense good. But what I see, like as a researcher in the field and someone who's actively building these models, is that everybody really deeply cares about those issues. Everyone is very focused on mitigating them, and we're all working towards the best possible outcome. Talking about some sort of sci-fi fantasy where these models are able to, get access to the nuclear codes and launch, talking about these sorts of crazy hypotheticals, it preys on, I think, humanity's, storytelling, their knack for latching on to extremely compelling stories. And we've also been tempered by media, which has taught us that there's a Terminator, it's out to kill us, it's a adversary to humanity. And so you're latching on to this part of the general public's brain, which is fear. And I think there are some perverse incentives with that. So I'm super opposed to that side of the dialogue. The other side, which isn't about existential risk or terminators, genuine risk about bias, misinformation, these things are completely legitimate. And when I talk to policymakers, I really think that they're trying to do the right thing and trying to wrap their heads around this. But there's this other side, which is just a total distraction and really just fear-mongering outright. Yeah.
And so what type of legislation or what kinds of things do you think that they need to focus on? Because it tends to be the case that regulation follows pretty far behind, in some cases can't catch up. As you say, like, there are different degrees of this. There's the privacy side, there's ensuring that the data that's training things is not biased, that there are not ethical issues in the way that it's applied. On the other side, there are like truly damaging things that can be done with this technology. Self-guided drones for military purposes, and right across to misinformation and using it at scale to undermine people's beliefs in going into elections, all kinds of things. How do regulators wrap their heads around it, and then how do they actually take action that is useful and proactive without inhibiting the beneficial parts of this, the development that's going to lead to a much earlier cancer drug or a solution for climate change?
Yeah, I think for policymakers, the way to approach it is to engage in conversations with the experts that are building this technology, researchers, folks like Cohere or OpenAI or Google, whoever else is building this technology, and get some firsthand experience with it and focus on concrete harms, not hypotheticals, not these distracting notions. I think when you zoom into the stuff that you're describing, which is like autonomous weaponry or misinformation, there's clear cause for regulation. And it's quite clear how to regulate those specific applications, so long as we're talking about regulating AI in the general sense, abstract sense. It doesn't have legs. And so I've seen a lot of regulation recently, which does the opposite of what it should do. Regulation has like two major purposes. One is, of course, first and foremost, we need to protect people. That's the first priority. The second one is we need to provide clear guidelines for industry and the folks building this technology so that they know where to play in the safe zone. And that's actually, for those of us building this tech, that's a good thing, right? Like when you know your lane to shoot along and innovate along, that makes things way less risky, way safer, and you can just abide by the law and push. Unfortunately, I think a lot of regulation does the exact opposite of this. Incredibly vague. It makes all of us who are building extremely unsure whether it applies to us or not, or where in this pipeline of the people who build the models to the ones who then take them and put them out into the world, who's responsible. The only thing that I've seen regulation make clear is penalties. And so you have a very vague path to a penalty, but then a very clear $25 million fine if you mess up, or 5% of your revenue. And so what that does is it inserts new risk that wasn't there before. And so for startups, it disincentivizes playing within markets that adopt those sorts of risks, because they don't know how to comply, because it's underspecified, but they do know, their investors or their potential investors do know exactly what the consequence is if the government decides to come and throw $25 million fines at you. So we really need to avoid those sorts of confusing and counterproductive policies.
Okay, so we're out of time, but I have one last yes or no question for you. You invented technology when you're at Google Brain, the transformer technology when you were at Google Brain, working on the West Coast. You also worked there in Europe. Decided to start Cohere in Canada, now one of the most valuable AI companies in the world. Good decision, bad decision to start in Canada?
I think good decision, good decision. This is like the home of AI. It is like the epicenter of it. And it's my home and my co-founder's home. The talent here is just extraordinary. And so we've been super fortunate to be able to build here.
Great. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much.